Hi, everybody. This is It's Gonna Be Okay. And I am just over the moon excited to be having this conversation with you today because we're talking to Alex and he is the reason I started Neurofeedback. We're going to share his story. We're going to share his mom's story of being a tough mom who decided, I'm going to help my kid thrive. And you're going to hear about all the ways that Alex has changed his life and is thriving 20 years later, because you need to hear it. Because if you're a mom or a dad and your kid is struggling, that means you're scared. You're scared about what's going to happen now, and you're going to be scared about what's happening in the future. And Alex's story is going to inspire you, not for just change today, but all the ways that you're going to keep pushing forward to helping your kids thrive. So welcome. I'm so excited, and we're calling this episode From Struggling Kid to Zero Symptoms because we're going to talk all the ways about you and your journey from your vantage point, because a lot of times we're talking to parents, and you are somebody who started this journey over 20 years ago. Your mom and dad came to me. And you were, as I always share, one of the most complex cases I've ever had. And I am will not accept that I cannot help somebody. And part of this journey was that your mom and dad were the same. They started with medications with you because you were showing signs of extreme difficulty paying attention, extreme impulse control. I tell everybody the story. Do you remember testing with me, Alex? Do you remember it at all?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
I
of
have
course.
been told, and I know nothing about it.
Yeah. So this was back in the day. So let's restart. Let's share your story. And obviously, clearly, he's a beautiful grown man. But your story from Dr. Rowe's side, and then let's fill in the pieces, is that, your mom, I was sort of, I was a person that people brought their kids to when everyone else said, we don't know. We don't know, right? I can't help you. So I met with your mom, Terry, and she's going to be coming on at a later time too, which I'm excited about. And I did neuropsych testing. I did testing. And, of course, a part of that, I went and observed you in school. And at this point, you probably know you're already kicked out of a few schools.
I don't think so.
You were.
Which, well, I mean, there were
Yeah.
multiple rebellions.
Yes. Well, they couldn't support you because you were super impulsive, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So staying seated in your seat was like a foreign concept.
Yes.
So even when I was testing you, what would happen was if I looked away, you were gone.
Oh, geez.
So I had to be really creative and stimulating. And, when I did the testing, I was like, this kid's like a genius. Like, he's really smart, but what you could actually produce, at this point, you're 8, what you could actually produce was like not even kindergarten level. You couldn't write, you couldn't do anything, but your brain was moving so fast. And, basically your diagnosis with ADHD, you and I have talked about this. You absolutely would have been diagnosed with autism at a later point. And, what did we do? We got you support in a public school, and your mom went and tried medications. And what happened when she tried medications, from your point?
Well, I remember that we would regularly have to raise the dosage for, I think I was in second grade at the highest point of whatever dosage we tried, and that started to make me sick. And so I remember there was a point where mom just stopped giving it to me because it was making me so sick that it just wasn't a good option to just keep going with that.
Yeah, and you actually developed cardiac problems when You did. So what happened was when you would raise from a seated position, you would then get
like not blackout, but like
You
dizzy.
would get low blood pressure from a
Yeah.
sleep physician
Mhm.
from the, it's essentially amphetamines. You tried different ones. Your
Mhm.
mom tried a bunch of different things. And, at this point, this was so long ago, right?
Mhm.
We would make some, tweaks and I wasn't doing neurofeedback, right?
Yeah.
So your mom called me one day and said, "Hey, we're going to do neurofeedback. What do you know about it?" And I said, "I know enough about it that it's awesome. I actually wrote a paper in graduate school about it. And, but there's nobody locally." And so I don't know how much you remember, but she drove an hour and 10 minutes 3 times a week for
Yep.
a long time.
Yeah. At the
Yeah.
first place. I remember that place.
Yeah.
I remember being in
Yeah.
the
He's
back room.
retired. He's a
Yeah.
lovely man.
Sure.
And what happened was, she said she was going to do it. I went off, started doing my continued working.
Mhm.
And one day I was up in the center of the town that I
Mhm.
work in, Ridgefield, Connecticut. And you and your siblings and your mom popped out of the van and you came right up to me and said, "How you doing, Dr. Rowe?" and shook my hand and looked me in the eye. And I'm
Aw.
pretty positive I said an expletive and said, "What the hell are you doing, Terry?"
Uh-huh.
And I just recall it so vividly. And I've told this story. And she said, "That's the neurofeedback." And I was like, he's a different kid. Like, and just to visualize the way you were, like literally, I was afraid to do testing in a room with you with windows because
Sure.
I was afraid you would climb out the window on
Sure.
the second
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah.
So that's how impulsive, when I went to go and see you in school, you were sitting in a seat, but your body was flailing and moving
Sure.
all
Yeah.
over, right?
Yeah.
And you were calm and connected. And it was just like, and so I started referring people and they were starting to drive. And, over the years, you
Uh-huh.
continued doing neurofeedback. And
Yeah.
I wound up getting trained because my clients got mad at me that I was making them drive. Um, and there were a lot of things going on. I literally had like an infant and I was training to do neurofeedback, which
Yeah.
wasn't easy. But once I started my own neurofeedback, I was like, this stuff is a shizzle. Everybody needs to do it,
Uh-huh.
But talk about like and Alex came back to me because you graduated high school at 16 years old. Like, so
Yeah.
I know all of you like poop your pants, worried about your kids, right? And here's Alex 20 years later, right? And he's an amazing adult. And we're going to talk about what he got there. But your mom continued on the journey in a lot of cool ways. She got really serious about neurofeedback. She really promoted it. You wind up doing a lot of sessions, and you came back to me to do an internship at 16 years old. And you asked me if you could talk to people. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
I remember talking to people
Yeah.
standing in front of a group of maybe, I don't know, 12
Yeah.
people?
Right.
Yeah.
And they asked you questions, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, we don't know. I was like, Alex, when they ask you questions, I'll save you or whatever. You were already like poised, right? And again, remember, this is Alex. Like, we're not seeing hyperactivity, and like to understand how impulsive and hyperactive he was extreme. And to see you be so chill, and you came back to me at 16, and I had seen you here and there, but not in the same way. I got to actually spend a lot of time with you. And I remember a mom asking you a question. I was like, what is he going to say? And she said, when did you notice? And
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember what your answer was. When did you first notice a difference?
Oh, man. I would wanna say, see, it's so long ago now that
Yeah.
I would wanna
But do
say
you
pretty
remember
early.
along the
I
way you
finished my therapy by, like, 11.
yeah.
Because I remember a lot of the questions of, "Well, how do you know you didn't just get older and grow out of it?" It's like, "Well, I finished
Oh, they
before I
always
was
say that.
11."
Yeah.
Like, you males develop a little slower than
Yeah.
females,
Yeah.
so I'm like, "No, I'm pretty sure about that one." But when I noticed, I'm not sure I
Yeah.
I can
Well, I'm gonna tell you
remember.
what your answer was because it
Tell
was
me.
it was like over it was like 12 years ago, was
More,
you
yeah.
said to me you noticed within a week or two that what was happening to you and you couldn't articulate it. And it made me think of Einstein, right? Truly, you had all these thoughts coming in
Uh-huh.
and you couldn't stop them.
Uh-huh.
And when you did neurofeedback, you said you could hear one thought at a time.
That's a great answer. I like my answer.
Yeah. But I don't know if you've like, if that rings true to you because
It
like,
it
right? Go
feels
ahead.
true, but it's so long ago. I don't
I
always
know it's so
remember
long
if I'm
ago.
like, did I make that? Like, do I really remember that, or was I just told?
But
Uh,
think about when you almost don't remember some of the early things. Like you don't remember, like I'm the most memorable person. You should remember me. No, not that
Definitely.
vein. But you were so unfocused that I think there are things you just don't remember. And it's sort of like now you're like, wow, at 11 years old, I really remember. What do you remember in terms of like you did all this neurofeedback? Like what do you remember about the experience? Pleasant, what do you feel like helped you during that time?
So the experience itself, I may have been too young to directly connect it at the time, but I do remember vaguely that starting in around that time when I had finished, so about like second, third grade, that was when, well, first of all, most of my memories begin around at that time, but it was also when,
Which is, do you know that's very interesting because, well, first of all, your memories should start if you haven't had trauma. Your memory should absolutely be there before age 10. But most people have memories. Typical first memories are around ages 3 to 6 is when you typically.
interesting.
Yep.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean,
But
you were like unfocused wouldn't describe the word.
well, what I remember as more so the effect in that
Hmm.
suddenly I could, it feels so cliche to use the words concentrate and focus, but
Yeah.
all of the thoughts that had been rolling around in the head kind of disjumbled and focusing on a whole bunch of other things, I could focus them on what I wanted to do or what I was supposed to be doing and just blow it out of the water.
And boy, did you blow it out of the water. Like I remember you being here and really, I think that's a really powerful thing because, you and I have talked about a lot that, and your mom too, like, everyone's always looking for a pill. Everyone's looking
Yeah,
for the thing. And I'm not
yeah.
saying neurofeedback
I
is
didn't
the
even really
only
think the
thing.
pills worked that well for
Well,
me, even, like, before because
mm-mm,
we'd have to up the dosage and up the dosage, but there was
no,
this period, a short period of, like, a day or 2 that I think my mom was like, "Okay, he looks a little bit more calm," but I didn't feel any different, I just felt
no.
sick.
No, you didn't have any benefit. She was doing what she had to do. And then at
Yeah,
that point, I knew about nutrition. I knew about all that. I was pushing it, but not pushing in a way where when people come to me, I'm like, listen, this is the way it is. We all want to be able to stop and get a Cinnabon,
yeah,
but it's not brain food, like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they grieve the process. And then I'm like, when you lean into like super clean, anti-inflammatory diet, your brain and your body's going to work better. It's not
mhm,
rocket science.
mhm,
It's common sense. But so that really was the only option. And again, there was nobody local who was doing it. So I didn't
uh-huh,
even think to say, oh, yeah, you should drive 3 times a week, an hour and 10 minutes. I mean,
yeah.
that's a mom on a mission,
Well,
like,
exactly, and I'm so lucky that I had mom to do that for me because here's the other thing, maybe not exactly what you wanna hear at this moment, but
yeah,
I didn't want to do neurotherapy. I
of course
was
you didn't.
youngest 8, oldest 11. I wanted to go do literally anything other than sit in front of a
Yeah,
screen and stare at, um, a little
right.
icon move up and
This
down
is
on a
before the
chart.
movies,
It
Alex.
Yeah,
This
this
is
wasn't
what,
we didn't even have movies when I was doing
no,
it. It was
you
just
had
I
to
had a
literally,
a graph and a cartoon which looked like a child drew it of a plane. It would go up and it would go down, and you wanted to keep it up. And if it went down, then that was like when the movie would stop. So
that's
I
right.
didn't even have like the good version. I
Now
I
you can watch
didn't
the
want to be there at
Lego
all, but
movie.
I
You
had a
can watch,
mom
you
who
know,
she's like, "No, this will work. I can see that it is working. You
Yeah.
need to keep going. It doesn't matter that you're bored.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Don't mess with your mother. I
Yeah,
tell
yeah,
you that.
don't mess with
I've been
her.
in plenty of special ed meetings with her. But
She was gonna be a Marine.
I mean, hello, I love it. You know, like this is what it is. And you know what's great about her? I mean, we were so tactical. I don't go to special ed meetings anymore, but you know, my whole shtick was I would pretend I was stupid in a meeting. And then I would get the responses I wanted. And
Mhm.
then, you know, basically at a certain point, they're either gonna agree to do what you need them to do, or you've caught it all on tape. And
Uh-huh.
now, you know, so
So I learned that from watching you at a young age, right?
I
That's
mean,
where I learned
really,
that
you
from?
know what I mean? And I can't remember. You shouldn't do it. But I remember coaching Terry on that because everyone
Uh-huh.
always thinks, and I don't think all school, you know, meetings are bad. Some of them are just the most amazing things, like you
Sure.
can't believe. But a lot of times, if they don't see the problem in the same
Yeah.
way, and then they don't see what the resolution is, you really have to learn how to use the laws which are in
Yeah.
favor of the student in
Yeah.
order to get it. So there's a way to kind of play it, and data has a lot to do with it, but also just asking the right questions to get the right answers, so that you can get what you kind of need. But of course you were bored out of your mind. It was like, I think
Ah,
Atari was
well,
more interesting,
I
Alex, you know?
absolutely,
Yeah.
because at least something happened.
Yeah, but now just so everybody knows, if you're considering, I do EEG neurofeedback. That's what Alex did. You are able to select a show or a movie, and you're able to watch that, and the screen won't give reinforcement to the brain if the brain isn't producing the right combination, and the brain will produce the right combination in 2 to 3 seconds. And it's not just the right combination; it's the exact perfect combination, and it's essentially working out the brain, training it at that high level. And then the brain says, oh, you want me to act like this all the time, and it switches and it starts behaving in a natural, healthy way. And here's Alex, I'm going to say it, 20 years later. And for you and I mean, you wind up doing over 200 sessions of neurofeedback. I've done a
Yeah, a
few
lot.
hundred.
Yeah.
And we were joking in advance that it's like our brain is it's not that we are any smarter. Clearly we're smart people. Alex is a very smart guy,
Thank
just so
you.
everybody knows. It's that we are organized and can process with more clarity, in an efficiency that is hard to describe. And whenever I describe it to other people, I always use the same analogy. If you know X-Men, it's like I think I'm Flash now when I'm learning and processing, because I hang out with some really smart people, no doubt. But I can get to the core almost the fastest person in the room, unless it's math, just saying.
I wanna so slightly different from your example, the way I
Okay.
wanna describe it now that I'm thinking about it after saying
Mm,
what I said earlier, is
yeah.
that it felt as if I had all of the knowledge, all of the problem-solving skills, and just was not able to apply them with each other to figure out the problem
Yeah.
until I had gone through
Well,
a
and
number of
and
sessions.
that's where, and I love that you said that, because that's where a lot of my parents come to me and say they're bright, but they can't finish their
Yep,
work, or they can't do
yep.
that, or whatever. And there's a behavioral learning part that has to happen, right?
Yeah,
If you,
there's
if
a
you keep
discipline
doing
that
the
goes
same
into it
thing,
too.
yeah,
Yeah,
great, but everyone wants the pill to work, right?
yeah.
And I always say 100% of the time, we should never have medication be the first line of defense. And I'm
Mhm.
with people all the time that are diagnosed with ADHD and other clinical conditions that no longer meet the clinical criteria. And
Sure.
there's a lot of reasons why the brain is unfocused, right?
Yeah.
And we're not going to really know, Alex. Like, I don't even know if I saw like your original cues. I don't even know, because he was doing cues back then, the guy that you went to, who's a lovely man. And like, I'd almost love to see what was really going on. I know you had a lot of what they call hypercoherence. So
Mhm.
your brain was over communicating.
Mhm.
And so in what's called a lower frequency. So when you're very unfocused, right?
Yeah.
We often think you don't have focused brain waves, but
Mhm.
But what people don't know is that really they have a lot of unfocused brain waves. And so, and why? So there's a lot of reasons. And I'm telling you 50% of the time, it's not genetic ADHD. It could be environmental toxins. It could be things like yeast. It can be infections. It could be birth trauma. There's so many reasons. Like when a kid is born today and they're not affected in some way, because we know 1 in 2 kids have a physical or mental health problem at birth now, and that's 11-year-old data or 12-year-old data now. But you had this over communication. And when I think about you and just to see how internal you were, that you weren't connecting with us. That's why I always say
Sure.
you would have been diagnosed with autism, whether that was real or not.
My parents called it Alex World.
Yeah. It was like I could knock on your door and get you for seconds.
I look through the window. Don't want to talk to her.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I had to do such, like I said, with that testing, such stimulating things. And so to even get your attention for short amount of time and you had a superior intellect on a IQ test that you weren't even paying attention to. So that's where everyone gets so hung up. Like, this is the IQ. You still have to be able to problem solve. You can't just think you can. You have to employ the skills. And so when people think about medication, stimulants, basically all they do is tie your foot to a gas pedal. There's no regulation. There's no control. What neurofeedback does is amplify your own assets. So that's why athletes do it. That's why, all the guys going out into space do it, because it makes your brain crisper and sharper. You don't even need a clinical issue, but obviously people are making this investment in time and money and resources to do it, because most of the time they at least start with the one kid and then they're like, I got 3 other kids. But when you then went through school, what was your school experience like for you? Because you graduated a year early at 16 and you went to college, for crying out loud, at 16. So, talk about it.
So first of all, I wasn't allowed to live on campus because my parents were like, we're not sending a 16-year-old to go live on a college campus. That's just a bad idea.
I mean, it would have been bad if it were me in the 80s. I would have been having like a disco in my room is what would have been happening.
I am generally pretty, I say boring because I like to do my own thing. But yeah, so I graduated from high school at 16, part of which was the project that I did on neurotherapy with you as my mentor. And I submitted that to my university instead of the SATs or the ACTs. I'm not sure they actually read it. They're like,
it was a fine piece of writing, my friend. Like, I remember for years we used that as part of our training of new staff. So no, thank you. It was just for me, just to know I definitely have a few people that always keep in contact with me. And we just did an episode with one of the kids I work with, Kat, and she's come back. It's such a full circle thing. Like, to me, it really fills my heart to see how amazing. But I've always kept in contact with your mom, and I've talked to you a bunch of times. So to see that people's lives just continue to get better and better because they made this choice,
definitely,
and decided, we're not going to continue this medication nightmare, and your life would be very different.
Definitely.
So
I don't think I would have enjoyed nearly as much success as I have thus far.
No, I don't think you would be regulated.
Yeah, probably not. I went off to college. I started with a biochemistry degree in undergrad and quickly learned that I did not want to be a scientist. However, at that point, I had already been in the degree for like a year and a half, and to change at that point, I didn't like my prospects to do so. So I figured, all right, I'll finish the biochemistry degree, and then I'll leverage that to do something else, anything else. I was going to be a diplomat for a while. That's why I spent all those. I lived in Germany, I lived in the UK, I lived in China for a little bit. German is my best second language. It's probably not great, but I love languages. I collect them. So I got German, I got a little bit of Italian, some Mandarin. Used to speak Russian, but I'm stopping that for recent events, replacing it with Polish actually. Um, but so I go on, I'm like, oh, I want to go into the State Department. I had friends in the State Department who were guiding me, and they had recommended that I get my master's in economics. And we had a number of things lined up, and my friends in the State Department were very accomplished in the State Department. So I was like, I will definitely listen to your advice.
Yes.
I'll get my master's in economics. But not every plan always goes according to plan, as you might know.
Oh, that's
So,
called life.
yep. So I always like to have a backup plan. And so I got my master's in finance and economics just in case the State Department trail didn't work out. In the first year that I was going in 2016, no, no, in 2012, no, I graduated from college in 2016 and went straight to my master's program the same year. And then we elected a new administration that did not favor the State Department. So that kind of jumbled up that plan a little bit. And eventually I decided I'll just come home. I'll work in the private sector, I'll work in finance. So I ended up, I first worked for New York Life selling life insurance, but now I work for a private wealth management firm, which I love the people I work with, love my boss, love what I
So
do.
important to be with people like where you just have your people, you know?
Absolutely. I'm
Mhm.
on vacation this week. We just got back from Vermont, but I still took the rest of the week off. But before I left, like always, they're like, "Oh, yeah, if we need anything, can we text you? Can we call you?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course, sure." Because at this point, I've been with the firm long enough that I'm like one of the core. There's my boss, my senior coworker, and me, and we make up the core. And then I have some junior coworkers. So I'm like, yeah, if you need anything, you can definitely call me. I'll be in the mountains of Vermont. I don't know if you can
Can't
get me, but
guarantee
you
I'll
can
get
try.
back to you. Yeah.
So and they never do. Or if I may get a text from my senior I'm like, really sorry to bother you on your vacation, but what's the answer to this one really easy question that you can answer like right now? So I love who I work with and what I do, and who I work for.
I'm so happy for you because, a lot of times we find careers, where, we fall into but maybe don't love it. So, and,
Yeah.
and I think when you're, learning in a lot of ways comes so easily to you, like, oh, I didn't want to do a biochem degree, but I figured I'd finish the degree, like not
Yeah.
many people can say that, Alex,
I was able to leverage that for my masters when they were like, "You want to do economics, but you don't, like how, oh, biochemistry. Okay, you can probably do the economics, the finance aspect. We think that you'll be able to figure out the math pretty easily."
I
Yeah,
think I think they were right.
yeah. I yes. I don't want to
Yeah.
say too much
Yeah.
because
No,
you know,
no, no.
but
But it
I
turned
it
out
was
really well for you,
it
right?
did.
And you
Oh
really
yeah,
enjoyed it. I remember when you started, you were like, I hope I'm going to like it. And then you were like, I really like it, Dr. Rowe. And I was like, good, because that's, we want you to be doing something that you love. And,
yeah.
even this conversation, like, people are listening to us having this conversation. I think what is remarkable, right? When you think about being a mom, right? And you have a kid who's struggling and you're so worried about the future, right? And the whole point of us doing this is that the future can look like this when you do the work. And there isn't a quick fix. She didn't do 20 sessions. She didn't,
No, it took
like,
years, and it was
and
hard, and it was tiring.
yeah.
Is it weirdly tiring too?
Well, but it's tiring. I'm going to tell you, it was probably tiring for you. Well, one, you were doing the boring kind, so that's hard. Because that's when I started. We were doing that too, and then as soon as they had the movies available, I was like, "What? This is amazing!" But also your frontal lobes need a lot of work, and so
Oh, sure.
when you're doing the frontal lobes, which are the brakes of the brain, they, working memory, they're the job manager. They interact with every part of the brain. So they don't get a break. So when
Yeah.
you're working it out, it was like you were you just get tired from
That
it.
makes
And
sense.
your brain needs to repair itself.
Yeah.
It didn't clearly last. It just was hard work, right?
Yeah,
You
well, it was like
weren't used to
working
paying
out at the
attention.
gym, only instead
Yeah,
of working out a muscle.
exactly. See, I say that all the time, and I didn't know that you were going to say that. It's exactly like
Oh,
working out in the gym. Yeah.
well,
And so,
yeah.
yeah, but that's how it sort of feels, you know? And I think what most people wonder about is like, what should I do? Right. And like some of the most common mistakes that I see happening, and even some of my own clients, like they give up too early. Right. So like you're seeing change, but in our world, we think change at a 25% level, if it's not 100% level, it's a failure. Right. But if
Yeah.
you're right. But
Yeah.
25% change is a lot of significance, right? And it's
Yeah.
like you have to keep working. And I think that is a big thing that people decide. They also decide that, well, my doctor must know better, right?
Uh-huh. No,
Well,
I
you're
don't know about that.
about that. So if it's not working, I had two incidences, and I'm going to do a whole separate episode about why expert care is really important. But I had two incidences related to business in the last week. Well, one was business and one was the air conditioning.
Mhm.
Long story. But basically, I had a problem that multiple people looked at and were like, I don't know. We
Mm,
just have to check it, or I don't know.
sure.
Nobody could give me an answer.
Mhm.
Right. And I think the story about your mom and the story of what happened is I didn't say no. I was like, I'll be damned. I'm going to keep going to experts. I'm going to figure it out. And one was something related to my website. And the guy told me within 2 minutes what was wrong. And he was 100% right. And literally even the manufacturer, the company that I used the software couldn't answer the question.
Wow.
And right. So sometimes, right, if you don't get a result that you know is really resolving the issue, like moving towards resolving the issue,
Mhm.
you have to keep searching. I think
Yeah.
that is a big reason. And your physician is not a specialist,
No.
your pediatrician, they're a generalist.
Yeah.
And they never have had a course in nutrition unless they've been trained in modern times. And even then, it's only 10% of them. So
Mhm.
they're not understanding the connection towards the ways to change the brain and behavior. And they're being trained in pharmaceuticals. I mean, you talk to a psychiatrist, they're not trained in psychotherapy, they're trained in pharmaceuticals. So there are way many more ways to change the brain than pharmaceuticals. Neurofeedback is one of them. PEMF is one of them. Diet is one of them. Certainly behavioral change. And I think the other part of things is like, once you started to pay attention and you were different, your mom leaned in and was like, what are ways to help him improve his study skills? Like those were the kind of conversations I had with her over the years. Like, okay, he's a lot more focused, but now he doesn't know what to do. And I was like, exactly. So
Yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah. So she got it and was like, okay, there's no magic. We have to keep moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like you did. It truly was a veil was lifted over you, Alex. Like you literally physically looked like a different kid. Like you didn't, your communication was different. Everything was different about you. And you know, like a lot of high intellect kids who struggle with focus, you can rely on your intellect, but then your mom realized, wait, there's still some more learning. There's still some more things. The journey was never over. You continue to move forward, right?
Yeah.
And I think those are the important lessons when people listen to this, because it didn't happen overnight, right? So that means that the change is not going to happen overnight, but you can't just rely on one path. And even if you have a physician you like,
Mhm.
and I don't mean to blame physicians, maybe it's a therapist, they just might not have the training. And in fact, they
Sure.
probably unlikely have the training.
Sure.
And people are here because they're scared. They're looking for something that's going to help. And this conversation about neurofeedback is a great conversation because you were a participant. Like, and you wind up doing it later again because you had Lyme disease, right? And your
Mhm.
gut went down a little bit. And it wasn't the boring kind.
Yeah. No, it was a lot more interesting once I could watch Lord of the Rings instead.
Yeah. And you got back up quickly. You were able to
Mhm.
just get right back. But really,
Mhm.
your brain had like you feel in control of your brain, right? Like you
Definitely.
definitely, right? And learning at that point became almost easy for you. Like it wasn't like test taking necessarily wasn't hard. It probably was. I know you don't like to. Alex also has an eye convergence issue, so reading for a long time is not your favorite. But you're able to extrapolate information quickly and get it out, right? I think that was
Definitely.
probably one of the big things for you. It probably was good you did a master's degree in finance and economics. You still got to read a lot, but finance.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're reading charts a lot for
Mhm.
economics. I have a lot of opinions on my studies of economics, but that's definitely a conversation for another
We'll
time, I
save
think.
that. We'll save that.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you and you know, like obviously you're here, you're on the other side, and one of the things like I think that would be really helpful to for parents to hear from you would be about why should they consider doing neurofeedback or any type of natural solutions from a kid perspective who's now an adult. Like what do you think parents would want to hear from you?
So the only one I can speak to is neurofeedback. And I would definitely recommend that one. Going back to my example of use of like exercise or like working out, I'd still relate it to that. However, the key difference between neurofeedback and say lifting weights or whatever exercise at the gym is as you get older, if you don't continue to lift weights, you'll you get older. Your body will lose its strength or its athleticism or whatever you want to call it. Neurofeedback is, as far as I can tell, 20 years later, permanent. You don't need to go back or maintain it. Once you have trained your brain and built those neural pathways around whatever the difficult areas are that are resulting in the symptoms that you see, then you have those pathways. And especially if you're going to then use those to be a functioning human being, I guess that probably reinforces them throughout the rest of your life. You don't need to go back. When I came back to you, I had some difficulty with Lyme disease, but also I had come back because I think I wanted to do some tune up for depression of some sort because that runs in my family.
But
Um,
your gut had broken down. So just so you know, so when you did the antibiotics, what had happened was your
oh yes,
right? So we had
yes,
to restore your gut. So it was the microbiome because serotonin is created in there. So we had to regulate your nervous system, get your gut back, and then you were fine. Like you,
well,
once you got over that, you were okay. So you
yeah.
came in, you did some neuro, and you feel like part of what I think you're trying to say is, and just so everybody knows, I'm legally not allowed to use the word permanent, but Alex
I
can. But
apologize.
it's
Oh,
no,
okay.
no, you're not apologizing. Alex can. It's lasting, and research shows it's
Last.
lasting over time. And you're right. What sort of happens is once the brain gets into a healthy rhythm, it will continue as long as you don't have a physical or emotional trauma. You're not taking a medication that interferes with your brain
Yeah.
activity. Wink, wink. Hello, psychiatric medication. Particularly SSRIs can really destabilize
Sure.
the brain. And and medication is a decision between you and your prescribing physician. I never tell people to just come off. People come to me all the time and they're like, "Can you help me come off?" And I'm like, that's between you and your prescribing physician. This is an alternative to medication, and there we have a whole program that supports the brain and body. But people have to make concentrated efforts in whatever medicated or
Definitely.
unmedicated, and
Yeah.
it's work. Like you had to
Like
do work.
going to the gym, this is something that you so while your brain is pretty amazing, just like any other biological process, when you want to change something, like when you want to grow your muscles going to the gym, I'm really going to harp on this gym
No,
example
I do it
because
all
it's
the
just
time.
so perfect. Where when you're building those neural pathways, when you're training your brain to work the way you want it to do, this is not a snap your fingers and it's done. You can't wave your magic wand that I am very entertained by. You're not going to go to the gym once, pick up a 5 pound weight, and then just like be some amazing bodybuilder.
Mm-mm,
That
mm-mm.
that takes time, it takes discipline, it takes effort. you need to, like with going to the gym, you then need to eat the right foods. And there are stuff after you, or while you're doing the neurotherapy, there are things that you need to sort of do on the back end as well.
Right.
And then once you're done, or once you've gotten to a point where you're like, great, these are the results that I wanted, then it's a lasting effect. It is something that will continue to be a benefit for the rest of one's life. I would have definitely gone nowhere near as far as I have had mom not sat there for hours going to multiple. She went to like three, four, five of these different seminars on what do I do to help my poor child, and she drove very far, and a lot of them were boring, and a lot of them didn't help. And then she found this one, and we tried it, and that's what gave us results. That's what I would say why people
And
should
your mom
do it.
stuck with it, like you said, like,
Yeah,
and
and it was
you,
hard, and
it was
I was
hard.
not cooperative whatsoever.
I'm sure you weren't. And she had slept, like she slept some of the other kids in with you too. Like this was not a pretty thing. It was 3 times a week for 8 months.
Mm,
Like you went a lot. I remember because we were in conversations and I think one of the things is that you've continued to take care of yourself. Like
yeah,
you realize that I've got to sleep. I've got to try to do these things. And I think that's why, yes, the changes are lasting, but you've also adapted that to a healthy lifestyle, which I
definitely.
think people are so resistant to. It doesn't mean you're perfect, but if
But
you do an
see,
80% great job, it's pretty good.
I don't think I would have been able to maintain such a
No.
lifestyle had I not gone through this. Because now let's I so yeah, I got my master's, and I'm working a a private wealth management firm. I do the investing. That is not an easy job.
Mm-mm.
I I've studied a number of languages I like. I paint. I am an artist. These are mine. I painted these. I am in a very solid relationship with someone who is very, very smart. Um, I go to the gym a lot. I'm about to get my black belt in Taekwondo. I've been all over the world living in various places, learning about things. And that requires being a functional adult, which I absolutely was not going to be. And it's really, the proof is in the pudding 20 years later. The everything I have going on, where I in 2023, where there's a lot of bad stuff going on, I feel a little, it's a little difficult to say, but I think it's important. I like my life. My life is great.
Your life is
That's why
great.
you should do this,
Yeah, I
because
know.
it
And
wouldn't have been
I think
possible otherwise.
I thank you for saying that because I think I think what happens is people are so afraid to take the leap because they think, okay, well, this is new. No, this is not new, honey. This is like since the 60s. Okay.
Yeah, it's old,
It's old. There are
but
tens
it
of thousands
repeatedly.
of research studies, and there are 3,000 peer-reviewed studies, right? And so this is an effective thing. Obviously, you need to go to somebody who's an expert in your specific area.
Yeah,
So, if it's ADD, go to an ADD expert. If
you
it's
need to get a
depression,
good
go to
practitioner.
good
Yeah,
practitioner because it's 50% science and 50% art. And that means it's
yeah.
highly, highly has a lot to do with skills,
They need
and
to know
just
what they're
experience.
doing, they need to know what they're looking for, they need
Yeah.
to know how to tackle it,
And you
it's
got to be serious. Alex knows
yeah,
I'm like no joke. Like I'm really serious about it. And everybody also knows I'm not doing this forever. And retirement is looming. So if anybody wants to do it, you can, I'll tell you where to go to drroseann.com/help. But that is not what this is about. This is about neurofeedback being a very powerful tool wherever you are in the world. There are board certified providers. And I want people to consider this. I also want you to know that it takes typically, you're not doing less than 30 sessions. My people don't do less than 40.
yeah,
And it takes time. And yeah, do I ever have people who do, you heard Tiffany's, in somewhere in between, her little guy, Ethan, is between session 80 and 100. and 100% he would have been given many diagnoses, probably autism. And so this is definitely an investment. But what I also tell people is it costs $10,200 a year to go to therapy once a week, psychotherapy. I'm a fan of psychotherapy, but you have to have a regulated brain. But there are many other ways you are spending money, but every day your kid doesn't get help is another day they suffer. It's another day your family suffers. And
Yeah.
I think you are the epitome of what life can be when you get a badass mama who's like,
Mom should rightfully have a lot of credit for this. It's
yeah,
not just the subject, but especially if your subject is a child like I was, the
yeah,
parents have to stay with this too. Obviously,
yeah.
they're making the decisions.
And
I'm
she
really
stuck with
glad.
it.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought up a moment ago that this has been around since the 60s. I remember doing that. I remember finding that out in my
Yeah.
project. And the thing that has been hampering this every time it like starts to grow is people. It's not the process, it's that
Mm-mm.
like it's not instant. I don't like that it's not instant.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
well,
and some people do have, like, when I first did it, I'm so I get really good responses to things pretty quickly, whether it's
yeah.
homeopathy or PMF or when I did neurofeedback, I had that wave that came over my brain, which is rare. And I said, when the hell can I get this equipment? Like, I was like, what is this? And I became like a junkie, and I was doing it twice a day. I had an infant. I was exhausted. I could
Mhm.
put myself on in my frontal lobe and jack myself up if I hadn't slept. Like, there were all kinds of little things that I could do. Not advising it under the,
Yeah.
but people would come in, my regulars come in and they're like, I'm feeling a little moody. Can we do something a little different?
Mhm.
Sure. But, it's definitely something that, is worth the effort. And I think what also happened once you got alert, the
Mhm.
pushback
Mhm.
that you gave your mom had ended because you were much more willing. And even at 16, you were super open. You were willing to try things. You understood. Your parents had great, honest conversations. I mean, just by this conversation, you're going to help thousands of people open their eyes to
I hope
this.
so.
I hope so too. And, just scratch the surface and, Google, get on my website, drroseann.com. You can get on and you can find out more about this as a real beautiful option. There are, no lasting side effects. A lot of anybody who has side effects from neurofeedback, typically it has to do with the brain not wanting to be changed in that area. So it's a temporary kind of things. If you're going to a highly skilled provider like myself, I tell most of the people, there's about 2% of people who have a negative side effect. I'm able to tell you in advance based on your brain profile. That's not going to happen. That probably 0.05% of practitioners would be able to tell you that. And so there's a lot of complexities. It's not anything you should be fearful. You just need to go to a highly qualified person, stick with it, do the sessions, commit to 40, and add lifestyle changes that are going to amplify it. And that means diet. That means looking at nutrient deficiencies. I'm going to tell you to add magnesium because it's my number one favorite. But there are other specific nutrient deficiencies that are, help the brain. Things like essential fatty acids, or if you have OCD, inositol, or, GABA if you're struggling with depression. There are a lot of things you want to get that part adjusted to. And that may be your neurofeedback provider, but it's most likely some type of medical professional. So no quick fix, and never forget the behavior. So therapy has its place when the brain is regulated. If whatever we tried to do with Alex before he did neuro would not stick. His brain was too dysregulated. And now, look at him. He's way more chill than I am. I have to bring my energy down. But I mean, I truly am so proud of you and all the things. And your whole journey of even just like loving and caring for yourself is truly inspiring, because when we do this holistic work as moms, we're like, when is our kid gonna, want to do this for themselves? And you've really embraced it.
Yeah, yeah. I would, if they're young, probably not anytime soon. But
Yeah.
I mean, as
Yeah.
I got older, and especially as after I finished, I got older, and I could look back. I'm like, wow, I'm really lucky that mom made me do that. That
Yeah.
she continued, because as difficult as I was, she's like, no, I need to help this poor kid because the medicine is making him sick, and he's
Yeah.
not going to have a good life
But
if I
she
don't
could
do anything.
see your gem. Like she could see that you had the intelligence, but the behaviors literally stopped it, and your mom
Yeah,
was like not going to accept what people told her, and I
yeah,
think that's really one of the most important messages in this. And she just kept digging. Like you said, she went to seminars, she went here. And even when I wasn't at the place where I was working at people, she went elsewhere and I supported her. And I was like, go for it.
yeah,
She wanted me to say, do it. And I was like, there's no harm. Do it. Do it.
yeah.
And your mom's path changed your life, but it changed mine too.
That's
How
always
about
a cool
that?
story.
Isn't that awesome? Anyway,
Yeah,
but I am so grateful for this time, and I hope this was inspiring, and I hope if you're scared on your journey as a mom or a dad or an aunt and uncle, that's okay, but don't live there. Take action and consider neurofeedback, because you got to hear how it changed Alex's life, and it can change yours too.